Next this evening, today marks the 50th anniversary of what racial justice campaigners have described as one of Yorkshire's most shameful episodes.
Nigerian immigrant David Oluwale had come to Britain to work at 19 years old, sailing into Hull on a cargo ship. But mentally ill and vulnerable, he ended up homeless in Leeds. And on the streets, he was repeatedly hounded and beaten by two police officers. He fled and drowned in the River Aire.
Policing has, of course, changed over the years, but 5 decades later, the family of another black man, a Falklands veteran who was unlawfully killed in police custody in Yorkshire, say there are still lessons to be learned. John Hill has the story.
The deafening roar of Yorkshire's textile mills, a draw for thousands of migrants from the British Empire. One of those was a Nigerian apprentice tailor, David Oluwale. But his dreams of a better life would never be realised. He was vulnerable, mentally ill, and ended up homeless. 50 years ago today, David Oluwale was seen running towards the River Aire in Leeds city centre. He was holding the back of his head with his hands. Two police officers, Inspector Geoffrey Elliker and Sergeant Kenneth Kitching, regarded him as a nuisance. They'd hounded him and attacked him with their truncheons. 2 weeks later, his badly beaten body was pulled from the water. Only undertakers attended David Oluwale's funeral, his last resting place a pauper's grave. His two attackers were cleared of his manslaughter but jailed for assault.
He must have been absolutely terrified. I'd have been absolutely frightened.
For racial justice campaigners Janet Alder and Ruth Bundy, there are striking similarities between the death of David Oluwale and the fate of Janet's own brother.
These are tonight's headlines. The damning verdict on the police response to the death in custody of Christopher Alder.
Christopher Alder's death in April 1998 in a Hull police station became one of the most controversial in police custody, when CCTV was recovered showing the father of two gasping for air as officers chatted and joked around him. It took 11 minutes for him to stop breathing, and as he lay dead, monkey-like noises were heard on the audio tape. He was unlawfully killed, an inquest ruled, but 5 police officers accused of manslaughter walked free on a judge's orders.
These men were of Nigerian origin, both black men, both very, very vulnerable. David, because he was a homeless man who needed care. Christopher, because he had been assaulted, been taken to the hospital and needed care. And the humiliation of both men, David being urinated on, Christopher laid with his trousers down to his knees and basically being left to die without any help whatsoever. And the racism in the case. Race did play a part. Officers were heard making monkey and chimpanzee noises while his body lay in situ after his death. And it's sad, it really, really is sad.
Christopher Alder is one of 178 black and minority ethnic people who've died in police custody in England and Wales over the last 3 decades. That's 14% of all deaths in police custody, and that's roughly in line with the proportion of black people in the population as a whole. But the proportion of black people dying in police custody after the use of force or with mental illness, well, that's much, much higher. Around twice as many black people die in those circumstances as opposed to white people.
I'm sure that there are police officers who are ashamed of these two episodes and perhaps others. We don't want to brand everybody in the same way, but these are two startlingly awful examples.
David Oluwale's family are unknown, but for Janet Alder, the death of her brother was only the start of years of trauma. In 2011, Christopher's body was found in the mortuary at Hull Royal Infirmary, 11 years after his family believed they'd buried him. In fact, his body had been swapped with that of 77-year-old Grace Kamara, and Christopher's remains had been used for training without the family's knowledge. Then it emerged that Humberside Police had placed Janet under surveillance during her brother's inquest.
It's had a right impact on my health. I've lost my hair. So physically, emotionally and mentally, it's had a massive the police couldn't even imagine what I've been through.
13 years after Christopher Alder was unlawfully killed, the government apologised to Janet on behalf of Humberside Police. West Yorkshire Police, which took over from Leeds City Police, says a case like David Oluwale's could never happen now. But the senior officer in charge of police diversity in the country has acknowledged there's still institutionalised racism within the ranks of the police. For Janet Alder, change can't come soon enough. John Hill, ITV News, Leeds.